Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. So we are streaming on Facebook Live. So if you like what you're seeing today, you can go ahead and tell your peers and colleagues about this, and it'll be put up afterwards on the website, right, Chris?
MSU Library's Facebook page.
Okay, so then it'll turn into a recording on the Facebook Live or Facebook page. So good morning, welcome. This is Water, a symposium. I know it sounds vague, but you can see from the program that we have a wide range of research going on around our campus. And this is a tradition in Scholars Commons here at Florida State, where over the last several years we've had symposiums in the spring and the fall on these broad interdisciplinary topics so that we can create and continue an intellectual conversation with people around campus. So the topic this year, we as part of the Sustainable Campus, have been working on a green initiative for the libraries. And as a result, Scholars Commons actually became Green Office certified. And so we have a good bit of, care going on in the building around sustainability issues and reduction of waste and these types of initiatives. And so we really wanted this year's topic to jive with those initiatives going on around campus and within the libraries. And so today we have a great slate of speakers. If you have not gotten a program, please do so at the welcome table. If for any reason you need to go to the restroom, there's some down by the elevators. So if you go back towards the entrance, there are bathrooms over there. And we'll be having a short break after the first session, and then we'll be having lunch around noon. Thank you for coming, and let's go ahead and get started with our first speaker, Dr. Jose Mendoza-Cortes. Yes, from College of Engineering. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's all right. So, well, this is my one of my first time I do talks for a white audience. I usually do to very hardcore scientists. So I'm gonna mix a little bit of broad topics with a little bit of science. So hopefully you will learn, or I will transmit some of my knowledge to you about what we're doing, and also along the way, perhaps you will understand why we're doing this. All right, so it's also my first time doing Facebook Live. I was avoiding it for a while, but all right, it feels weird. All right, so what I'm going to talk about today is how we would like to use water as a way to store energy, right? So it sounds weird that we can, I will show you how we're doing this scientific process of transforming water into something called hydrogen and use that hydrogen as a fuel. In the future, maybe we can use hydrogen instead of gasoline, right? So that's where we're going. And the advantage is that if we burn hydrogen instead of gasoline, the side product will be water itself. It would not be CO2. So you can imagine the consequences will be, enormous, because you will not kind of contribute to the CO2 levels in the earth. So I'm going to give you a little bit of science on that part, and also a little bit of perspective on why we're doing this. All right, first of all, I'm not sure if you know where is the College of Engineering. So first, let me present where I work. So this is the College of Engineering. It's in the south part of campus. And you're going to see that this is ME. This is another of our labs, the Materials Research Building. And this is the MAC lab. This is the National High Magnetic Field Lab. So this is where I work, and I sometimes come to main campus to, interact with colleagues. So now that you know where I am, usually, because for some reason not many people know where College of Engineering is. So now let me tell you what we try to do. So we try to do these very complicated solving equations, but this is more or less the big idea. So the big idea is that there are laws of nature that we respect, that we can model, right? So it looks complicated, but depending of the degree of the zoom, how we zoom into a problem, we can approximate things differently, right? So we use the laws of quantum mechanics to study electrons. We use the laws of Newtonian mechanics to study atoms, and so on. So you can imagine that now we have built up so much knowledge as humanity to attack many problems. So I use all these equations, and I'm going to try to use it for renewable energy, so transforming water into hydrogen. Okay, so it looks complicated, but basically we take all these complicated equations and we put them into big computers. So this is what we do most of the day, right? So we look at fridge, and then we put some codes in it, but they're actually not fridge. So they are super big computers in the size of rooms. So this is a perspective. So this is one in the national lab. This is the one supercomputer that we have, or a big cluster of computer we have here in FSU. Part of it is in the rack, but we're moving it to another center. And usually it looks like this, right? Like these, when you look at Star Wars and the new episode that they were grabbing some, the Stardust or something. So it looks like more or less like that. So that's what we do. We put all these equations into big computers, and we ask the computer or program it to help us to attack this problem. Okay, so we have the equations, we have the resources. Now what do we do with it? So when I start doing this, I realized that coding and solving this very abstract equation is fun, and it makes you look cool. It's like, oh yeah, I derived these very difficult equations. Now what do I do with it? So I realized that we as a humanity are passing through some stage that we depend highly on certain source of energies. So if you look at it, probably we're around here. So most of the source of energies we have is not renewable resources. So probably in 100 years, we might have some difficulties because that part is going to run out, but we depend so much on it. So when I started doing research, I realized I would like to contribute to this little piece, which is not renewable resources, basically things that comes from the sun, from the wind, and things like that you will get over and over and over without damaging or altering the environment too much. Or that's the principle. So one of the things that we did first, it was doing solar energy. So basically take the sunlight and transform it into some sort of energy, either a battery, either a fuel, and so on. So just to give you an idea why solar energy or sunlight is so important. So if we take all the energy that the sun delivers to the earth in 1 hour, right? So somehow we catch all that energy for 1 hour. If we can store it somehow, it will be enough to satisfy all the needs humans have for an entire year. Okay? So 1 hour, catch all the sunlight. Now somehow catch it and then use it, and you will satisfy the needs of humanity for 1 year. Okay? 1 hour, 1 year. So that's why, it's mind-blowing because we have so much resources there, but we don't use it for whatever reason. So we would like to use part of that energy, maybe catch it somehow and store it somehow, such that we can use it later. So instead of not using non-renewable resources. All right. So this is my scientific, approach of things. So I call this a holistic approach, right? So I'm going to show you how we take a little bit of the sunlight, we trap it, and we're going to take that into some sort of catalysis, and we're going to use that to manipulate water. Okay, we're going to take water and we're going to manipulate the chemical bonds, and we're going to store that energy from the sunlight into those chemical bonds. Okay, and then hopefully later on we can use that hydrogen instead of gasoline. And then since you burn that hydrogen instead of gasoline, now you generate water instead of CO2. So it's very, very interesting, right? Because the only thing that you need is water. You transform it, you burn it, you get water back, and then you do this cycle over and over. So it's a very interesting idea, very appealing, because the only input that you need from energy is from the sun, and then you get that energy out that you can use for home or for driving your car, things like that. All right, so this is very probably abstract stuff. So I will try to show you a little bit of chemistry and physics, but at level that hopefully you will get a approach. So this is equations that we do. So it's chemical equations. Looks complicated, right? So it's like I saw that, and it was, I don't know, somehow different to what I'm used to. So this is how scientists write these equations. So they write it as some sort of transformations where you transform water into oxygen and hydrogen. That's what it means. And now each of these equations are going to need electrons and you're going to need protons. But I found another way to explain this complicated stuff, right? So there is not going to be a quiz on this. So there is another way, okay? So we're going to take the sun and we're going to take the water, okay? So I'm going to draw water like this. So every dot here on the water is going to represent an electron, right? And hydrogen has this electron with itself, and then oxygen has this electron with itself, and so on. Now, we're going to transform water. You know, this is how you scientifically write water. And then we're going to transform it into hydrogen, okay? And hopefully the hydrogen we'll use instead of gas. Now, let me show you how we do it. Okay, we take the oxygen, right? The waters from the oxygen, and we take the hydrogens of the water, and voila. We have transformed water into hydrogen and oxygen, right? And that's the process we would like to do. I hope you like that animation because it took me 3 hours in PowerPoint. So let me just play it again. So my 3 hours are worth something. So that's what we do. This is our scientific thing, right? In a very broad context, which is transform water into oxygen and hydrogen, right? So it looks simple, and we call this storing energy in chemical bonds, okay? So we usually store, when we use hydrocarbons, we take the energies from chemical bonds as well, but it's from dinosaurs that were, underground for a bit. So now we're gonna use water, and we're gonna use this. So now I'm going to show you a video that my colleague in California, Carl Warsack, shared with me, which is an actual device of taking water, you put sunlight on it, and you're going to transform the water into hydrogen, right? So you're going to see bubbles, you're going to see a system that you shine water on it, and it's bubbling something. So what we're going to see is water is going to be around, and the bubbles are going to be hydrogen and oxygen. So basically doing this process, we just put in some sunlight on it, okay? So, oops, let me show you. So this is belonging to a fuel generation, and it's a video of Carl Warsack. So what they're doing here is a device, it's low resolution for a purpose because, it's their video still. So you have water around, and the only thing you're shining on is gonna be sunlight, okay? So this is how one of the current prototypes that people have been using looks like. And so you have water, you have sunlight, and then you can see generating some bubbles. So that's hydrogen and oxygen. So this might be one thing that we will see in the future, more advanced, that we can just take water and transform it into some sort of energy. All right, so now I'm going to take you to a little trip of science, science. Hopefully you will learn a little bit of why we do it and how we do it. So first of all, we took inspiration from nature. And we have, so that's the time. All right. So we take inspiration of nature. So we learn from nature that every single green leaf on the planet has this thing called a protein that is called photosystem 2, right? So it's a protein that is inside every green leaf on the planet. And then that's what it does all the magic in nature. So every green leaf takes sunlight and it transforms it into food so it can grow, right? But we don't want food, we want fuel, okay? So we're gonna tweak that, we're gonna kind of hack that system. But first we're gonna learn how nature does it, right? So I'm gonna show you how nature does it. So this protein I told you about, it's this big little monster of a protein. So it has around 100,000 atoms, right? So you have, imagine now we zoom in into the leaf. So this half is inside the cell of the leaf, this half is outside the leaf. And there is water around. And then this is what how nature does all this magic, right? So it takes sunlight, it takes some sort of that sunlight and can transform it into food, okay? So this is called photosystem 2. And until 5 years ago or 6, we didn't know how it looked like. It was due to a heroics of some Japanese scientist that spent 15 years of his life, making these and try to characterize it. So now we know how it looks like. But still there are so many mysteries around. So one of the mysteries is how nature transforms specifically that water into, glucose, which is the food that it grows and so on, and animals eats the plants and stuff like that. So this is what it does, all the magic. It's called an Oxy Evolution Center. We call it in the scientific field a catalyst, right? Catalyst is just one little molecule of water in the system that helps you to process a chemical reaction. All right, so a lot of science there. So I'm going to turn this protein that is in every single green leaf, and I'm going to turn it 90 degrees, right? So we were looking at it like this. Now we're looking at it like this. So the reason we do that is so you can see this little cluster of things we call the catalyst, that it transforms the water into hydrogen. And this part, it's around this side of the protein. So this is called the antenna process, okay? So the antenna system is going to take the sunlight, it's going to transfer it to here, and here is where you're going to transform the water into something else that eventually becomes food. That's how plants do it. Okay, so we say, okay, so that's how nature does it. It has been doing it for quite a while. What can we learn from it? Well, what we learn is that when we submit in that so-called catalyst, the thing that it does the magic, it looks like this, right? Imagine it's a cube where every corner is manganese, oxygen, and so on. So, this is very abstract stuff. Basically, the idea is that, this is how scientists visualize it, or they visualize it like this. It's like, oh, okay, so it looks, there's some chemical bonds, there's some elements there. So what we say is that, okay, so it looks complicated because nature has been doing this for a while. But what we can learn from this is that, well, maybe we can make something in the lab or in the computer that it looks like a cube. It has the same connectivity, it has the same elements, and let's study it. Let's see if we see the transformation in water into something. So, okay, so we take this complicated information and then we make models out of it. So we collaborate with many people around the world, and we have collaborated making models and study those models. And then we say, okay, so nature has been doing this, but there is an issue, right? So nature converts sunlight into food, okay? But the big idea I show you here is convert sunlight into energy, right? That we can use later on for home or from the car. Now, we would like to tweak that and not making food, but making fuel. So we're going to learn from this, and then we're going to process another type of material. So there was another issue, which is nature does this process, and after 1,000 times, it dies. So the protein makes water transform into hydrogen, and it dies. And then the cell makes more, and then another 1,000, and then it dies. So we would like to create a material that it doesn't die, because it's part of bio stuff. So we say, okay, oops, I passed one, but due to time. So, okay, we say, let's learn something out of nature. So that's what we did. We learned how nature does it, and it's due to this little cube. So we went to, the scientific literature, and we found that there are minerals that kind of look like that building block that nature has. So this is a mineral, and we thought that because it's a mineral, maybe it will not die, right? Because this thing makes 1,000 process, and then the protein just gets destroyed because there is so much, oxidation going on. But we found this mineral that people have been looking at it for a while, but we look at it from another perspective, which is it has the same building block as nature. And there is a lot of scientific stuff on the background, but basically what it means is that we can take this mineral and do the same process as nature does. So now there is a lot of things that we can play around. So these are the atoms, and this is how it looks, when you look at the real material. It's not fantasy here, it's all real. So then we play many games, right? Because we follow the laws of quantum mechanics and all the laws of nature. So we can essentially reproduce what will happen in experiments. So we play around with it, and we discover some effect that we call, basically all these complicated graphs, it comes down to the following, okay? So this is a way to plot properties of materials, but what we discover, this material is very difficult, it's very bad at absorbing sunlight, okay? That's what it means. Then you go to these other complicated graphs, and it says that it's very good at trapping sunlight. What that means is that something that it was very bad, it becomes into something very good just by peeling it off, okay? So this material that we discovered, if you just take it and peel it off, just like with Scotch tape or something, you can get just one little of that surface, and it will be super good at trapping sunlight. And this can be of interest because this is essentially what we call artificial photosynthesis. Okay, so it went to all these, it was covering Forbes and CNBC and I think MSN and Yahoo. I don't know who reads MSN or Yahoo anymore. I haven't heard of people reading MSN or Yahoo anymore. But it went to all these places, which is interesting. Basically, the idea, all these complicated slides that I show you, it comes down to the idea that we can use that sunlight, find that process to convert it into hydrogens, and basically it's simulating what photosynthesis does, but we call it artificial photosynthesis. Okay, so this is a cartoon of how it looks. So that complicated stuff that I show you, it looks like this. It will probably trap sunlight. It will generate something called electrons and holes, and it will transform the water that is here into hydrogen. Okay, I'm actually not sure how we're timed. Do we have? That works? Oh, okay. I thought it didn't work because it didn't move. It's going? All right. So I guess on those 4 minutes, I just want to touch into a topic of, let's say we already transformed, we take this water, right? And we do all these complicated stuff that goes here, and then we generate hydrogen and oxygen. Now, we would like to transport that hydrogen and use it for our cars, for example, right? And then later on burn it instead of gasoline. And then that would generate some energy out, and then the side product, water instead of CO2. Right? So now I'm going to show you how we're doing this complicated stuff of how to put the hydrogen and put it in a ramp. Now, in many aspects, when you look at hydrogen, it's renewable because you get it out of water, and then the hydrogen goes back to water, and so on, so you can make that cycle. Now, in many for example, when you plot something called power density, the hydrogen is 3 times better than gasoline or better than methane or methanol. So in many aspects, it's good, right? But hydrogen is a gas, so you cannot put it in a liquid form unless you compress it or lower the temperature a lot, okay? So that means that you have to invest energy to carry it around, right? So the energy that you gain out of the sunlight, out of this process, now you might lose it because you have to invest energy on compressing it or putting it to a very low temperature to make it like a liquid, okay? So it's good in this sense, but there must be a way not to waste so much energy to compress it or lower the temperature. Okay, so we applied, actually many people around the world have been doing this. So people create this material called porous material. So these little objects, imagine they are materials that have so many little pores, so they are called nanoporous materials. What that means is that imagine all of these little cages, they are connected to each other in every direction. So it's full of cages. And each of these cages, you can control the size of the free space. So this little ball, yellow ball, you can put something in it. Okay, so it just means to represent, it represents free space. So material scientists and chemists have come up with this combination stuff where they combine many things, many chemicals, and they can make different kinds of cages. You can do it with metals in it, without metals, so you can make it organic. And we worked this. So I was an experimentalist at that time, and I was able to help with 2 of them. And I was an undergrad, so if you ever think is an undergrad, you cannot do things, so we can. So, well, because of time constraints, I'm going to tell you that we use different chemicals and we improve that hydrogen absorption things, and we just publish these things that all of these materials that I show you, you can put hydrogen inside, and there is a lot of details in our scientific paper. But the idea is that now, instead of, you can put this in a tank, and there are already 3 commercial cars that doesn't run in gasoline, but it runs in hydrogen. And it's not far off applications. It's still a little bit expensive, in the range of 50K to 70K, but you can get a lot of incentives. But it's mainly in California, and the reason it hasn't been spread is because you need a hydrogen station, right? So carrying hydrogen around is a difficult part. So with what I show you, hopefully we will transform that water into hydrogen on site, so you don't have to carry that hydrogen around. And that's with that. I hope you I communicate part of my message, which is we're doing hardcore science to do all this process, transfer sunlight all the way to hydrogen and use it for an energy source. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
We have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. So
Oh, we do?
anybody
Okay.
would like to ask questions, feel free.
Does the water that you use, like how they have that little machine, does it have to be treated or cleaned or a certain balance or anything like that?
Yes, at this point, yes. So that video that I show you, my colleague, what they did is very clean water at that point. So that's video of around 3 years ago. So it has to be treated because, so when you do this process, there is a catalyst here involved, right? So the first 10 slides that I show you is trying to do this catalyst, basically the chemical that helps you to transform it. So that guy gets poisoned very fast at that point. Now we're working on something that it doesn't get poisoned that fast. And there are ways to do it without getting poisoned, but it's expensive. So something I didn't mention is that one of the interests we have now is doing it with something that is cheap, making that catalyst with something called rare abundant elements. Basically things that you can find in great quantities on Earth. Things like, silicon, all these elements that are abundant in Earth. So that would mean that if you were to make these in a big scale, it will be cheap and it will be, industrially scalable. So yeah, the answer is yes, it has to be treated at that point because the catalyst gets poisoned. But there are catalysts that are expensive. And the one I show you here that is doing this is actually cheap enough, but we haven't tested yet. So maybe it doesn't get poisoned. We'll see. Yes?
What's the next sort of area or breakthrough that you're working on to keep the process becoming more efficient?
Well, that's a very good question. So photosynthesis does it at 1% efficiency, right? So what that means is that whatever, let's say you throw a certain amount of energy from the sun, so only 1% of that energy the leaves are going to capture, and it's going to transform it into food, right? So if we reach that efficiency, we will be happy. So 1%. The idea of many people is, they're very ambitious and they want to do 2 or 3 times what photosynthesis does. And I think it's feasible and people have shown you can do it. But the main constraint and the main barrier is cost. Okay, so as I was mentioning, there are many things in the scientific literature where you can do this. You can do an efficiency that is unbelievable, but it's with materials that if you put all the materials that are on Earth and we produce per year, some of that substance is like this amount, right? So it's like some amount of material that if you were to distribute this with everyone on the planet, it will not be enough, and also will be very expensive. So the main barrier is cost. How to make this process, all this, maybe as efficient as nature, that would be okay. But cheap enough such that we can make it in big scale and can be affordable for people to do. So that's the main barrier right now. Yes?
From a manufacturing perspective, how do you create a car engine using the nano-porous materials?
Let me rephrase. So you're saying, how can you create this?
So you have an engine in a car and it's running on hydrogen, and you were talking earlier about capturing, your process in these nano-porous kinds of materials. Is that what's going into these engines to make them run, or is that your proposal? Or?
Well, actually, these engines, so the idea is you have a tank, right? Just like you have a tank for gasoline, you will have a tank for storing the hydrogen. Now, it's a good point that you brought up because the main cause, the reason why these cars are expensive at this point is the tank itself, okay? So you can imagine that all the technology is now going to how to store that hydrogen and how to make it safe. So most of the cost of these cars will come from the tank. And this tank is made of something called like reinforced carbon, nanofibers, some fancy stuff. So basically what it means is that you put the hydrogen, and no matter what you do, you heat it, you do anything to that tank, nothing is going to happen to it. That's why this thing is so expensive. So the idea that I show you with these porous materials is to put it inside the tank. So now it's counterintuitive, right? Because you said, okay, you're putting solid inside a tank. How can you get more hydrogen inside if you're already occupying more space? So it's a little bit counterintuitive. So the reason is the porous itself. So it turns out that hydrogen is a gas, right? So it's like a very antisocial person, right? So it doesn't get along with anyone. So what you do is you put it in a room and make them roommates. So when they are roommates, it's like, okay, I cannot go around. So that's what the pores do it. So they force them to be next to each other. And in general, you're going to put more hydrogen in the tank than not the porous materials itself, right? So you force them to be together. So summarizing, the tank is most of the cost. You put these porous materials inside the tank. And even though you occupy more space, you put more hydrogen in it because of this effect of forcing them to be next to each other. Yep. And, oh, yes, please.
I can't remember, do you know the price? What do you know the price?
Well, what I read in Wikipedia and the news is that it's between 50 and 80K, but that's the rough. Now you have some incentives. So because this is not this is renewable and this is hydrogen stuff, so you have a lot of incentives that, it can lower the cost probably 30K or 40 or something like that. So the thing is that right now it's only in California because you have these fuel stations. So it's fuel stations called hydrogen fuel stations. So that's the main constraint. We could have it here, we have so much sun, but we need the infrastructure of having these fuel stations for hydrogen. So the only thing that you will have to put in, it's not scientific fiction or science fiction, but you can just need water, water, sunlight, you get hydrogen, and the only thing is you just need the catalyst, and it could be something we will be doing in the future. Yes.
A quick question. So with the cars and everything, so Ballard Power Systems, for example, is a big company about .com era, 17 years ago or something like that. So hydrogen is not like it's not a new idea to try to power from hydrogen. So I guess and they had something that they thought was a commercial product already. So what is the challenge? And you talked a little bit about efficiency and cost and infrastructure. So what paint us a picture of what does a utopia look like when we can actually start implementing this, and what are the changes that have happened since those earlier commercial efforts were happening?
Yeah, I think I haven't read specifically on that company, but at large, what I read is that when you have the fuel stations, when we have gasoline or petroleum-based fuel station, you have connected, right? And sometimes you can transfer that fuel by cars or maybe a little underground system. So the problem with hydrogen is you cannot do that. So if you build hydrogen tube or made of steel, hydrogen corrodes that. So you have to make very expensive tubes or machinery such that hydrogen doesn't corrode it. Now you cannot transport it to a car because then you will have to compress it or liquefy it. So that also you invest in energy. So the main constraint besides the cost, because let's say we found a material that it can do it. Now the ultimate solution will be to make the hydrogen on-site. So you don't have to deal with the problem of moving it around. And now how to make it on-site, you might need some, something that captures the sunlight, where you put the water, where you bubble it, where you store it. And that would be something of interest. But as I told you, once you have the hydrogen, most of the times you have to make some sort of reinforced carbon stuff, just like the tanks, to store it safely. And I think once you have that, it's probably going to last for a while. I think I have 1 minute.
No, that's fine.
Probably we can come in after.
Chris, last question.
Yes.
Okay.
I was just asking, how are these current stations getting their hydrogen? How are they sourcing it?
Well, that's a very good question. It seems that part of it is from a nuclear reaction process.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, it's a start.
Yeah, it's a start. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Is that on site? Is that happening on site?
no, they also transfer. Yeah, because I think it's mainly as a proof of concept. Just people they want to show that it's safe. Because you're putting this hydrogen at 300 atmosphere or probably sometimes 700 atmosphere. So it's a lot of pressure. It's like you're driving into a little, it's the Hindenburg size, but you contract it into that little space. So you are on top of a Hindenburg. So it's like, oh wow, I'm tough with it. That sounds a little bit scary. But they are just trying to show mainly that no matter what it happens, even if someone gets in an accident, you're not going to explode. Because of the hydrogen tank. Yeah. So there's a lot of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can put it onto the